Before we start today's podcast, I want to ask you a question. What if you could change a life? Key for Life is a charity whose mission is to break the cycle of crime by reducing youth reoffending. Its award-winning 7-step rehabilitation program used both in and out of prisons has been independently evaluated and recognized by the Ministry of Justice Data Lab as one of the most effective models for creating change in this area. Only 14% of participants on the Key for Life program have reoffended 1 year post-release, compared to the national rate of 64%. Key for Life was founded and is run by Eva Hamilton, one of the most extraordinary women I know, who was also my first guest on Bandwidth Conversations. I'm a trustee for the charity and am privileged to mentor a wonderful and talented young man. There are many ways people can help: volunteering, mentoring, providing a work taster, or donating. For more information, please look at www.keyforlife.org.uk, all lowercase. Help change a life. Thank you. Hello and welcome to Bandwidth Conversations, a podcast that finds out about the stories and journeys of artists, performers, and rock stars of life. My guest today is an award-winning actor, a screenwriter, and director. His versatility is displayed in the variety of roles he has played, from a drug dealer to a refugee, a terrorist to a talented doctor to Freddie Mercury, and I'm naming but a few. He has been described as a young Robert de Niro. His film Unicorns, which he wrote and co-directed, is out on the 5th of July 2024. That's 2 weeks after this interview, and it's wonderful. It's brave, it's groundbreaking, and it's deeply human all at once. What is less well known about him is that in an interview, he admitted that he talks to himself in two-way conversations, which I found hugely reassuring, because so do I. Strangely, I am at my best in those conversations. He's also our youngest guest on Bandwidth Conversations since we started 3 years ago. I'm really excited to be talking today to James Krishna Floyd. James, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I can't speak after that. I don't know what to say. I feel like my mum wrote that or something. So thank you.
Well, you grew up in North London. Your father is British and your mother Singaporean, of Malaysian and Indian descent. Were the creative arts part of your family culture?
Yes, very much. So my mum, who is originally South Indian, she's a Tamil from Tamil Nadu. She came to this country when she was very young, as a teenager. She was 14. She actually came by car with her family, believe it or not.
Wow.
A really interesting story because it was actually covered by the Times a long time ago. And she stayed here with some of her siblings. One of the things that kind of got her by was that she was a really good classical pianist. And she
goodness.
Yeah, she ended up getting a scholarship to the Royal Academy to study classical piano, obviously, when she was, I think, 17, and she joined when she was 18. She was fully trained. And then after that, life got in the way, and she eventually met my dad on the kind of hippie trail in the sort of 60s, 70s.
In the UK? Did you meet him in the UK? Or?
Yeah, it's all mainly around Northwest London, actually. Yeah, and there's the sort of swinging Northwest London 70s. Yeah, and they ended up having a few kids. I was the youngest. Am the youngest, sorry. Yeah, kind of a mixed race family. Dad was also, he played guitar, still does actually. He's a very good guitarist. He's a huge Beatles nut. So, I was listening to Love Me Do and From Me to You and I Want to Hold Your Hand since I was very young. And I kind of copied them both. I play a little bit of both, and I can't read music properly, but I can sort of play a fake version of like Furley's and all these kind of things. But very musical household and very creative household, but no acting. And that was something that kind of came to me through mainly because my dad took me to the RSC a lot in the 90s. This was when Adrian Noble was running it. And even just before then, I think Peter Hall was still around, and his son, Edward Hall, fantastic directors. And it was just an extraordinary time. The productions were just remarkable. And we saw, a whole history season, I remember, where we saw everything. We saw Henry IV, 1 and 2, Henry V, Hamlet, Richard III. And that was why I think the first idea of going into the arts really was in my mind secretly. And it wasn't until I kind of became this, university dropout at the age of 20, or I actually want to try this. And then I became a broke theatre actor for a long time, and then sort of slowly but surely got into film, and then, etc., etc.
So at school, you weren't actually acting. You were.
I did my first play when I was 16 at school. That was Romeo and Juliet, and I played Romeo really badly.
I'm sure you didn't.
I don't know, it was pretty bad, but I guess, when you overact at that age, people probably like it. And then I did another play called Another Country
Yes.
by Julian Mitchell, which is an amazing play. And that was a really famous play actually at the time because it was the play that ended up starting off quite a few careers in the West End. It started off Kenneth Branagh's career, Colin Firth's career, Edinburgh, and famously Daniel Day-Lewis. I played Tommy Judd, which was the role that a few of them played. It's an amazing play, actually. It's fictional, but it's heavily inspired by the Cambridge Spies, the famous Cambridge Spies. It's basically set in this boarding school. They're these kind of, idealist communists. Touches on sexuality in such an interesting way. Obviously, the political times in a very tender, interesting way. But what was quite unusual was that, obviously I'm half Indian, so I'm brown. And, at school, no one cared. My drama teacher didn't care. So I was playing, I guess, for all intents and purposes, a white guy, for lack of a better term. I was playing Romeo, I was playing Tommy Judd, and it was great. And it wasn't until I went into the industry professionally that all of a sudden, like having a bit of a tan kind of became this massive thing, and it was a real like moment of being smacked down to earth and being like, oof, okay, this wasn't an issue for me as a teenager, but now when I'm trying to make this a profession and make a living out of it, it was something I had to deal with direct. And that was pretty rough. And it's interesting because you mentioned, playing terrorists, and it's like, I've never actually played one because I avoided it my whole time. I would rather be broke really than play those roles. But I did end up recently doing a little flip, and I star in this series on Hulu called No Man's Land.
Yes.
I play someone who pretends to be one in order to infiltrate ISIS, but also to bring back his two best friends who have been, brainwashed and have gone to Syria to join ISIS. So it's interesting, like that word terrorist was like, it was an even,
like a trigger.
It was an even dirtier word back then and a big trigger for me because it was like, this must be what, 15, 16 years ago. That was all that was around for actors like myself, just trying to get a role. And it was horrible. It was really, really awful. And I always remember it was really funny because I remember seeing some actor, I forget who it was. It was some actor who was talking about it. And I remember thinking, gosh, yeah, I remember seeing you in an audition room and kind of feeling that pain with you. And I remember thinking, gosh, like this is something that people don't see. They only see the kind of more, I suppose, successful roles that don't kind of explore stereotypes in a very cliched way. It was a weird time. And that was when I went into theatre, really. I started doing some really good stuff in theatre and plays above pubs. And I think some of my best work really was in a play called Dove and Ali, which was in a pub in Battersea called Theatre 503, tiny theatre, fantastic work, a lot of contemporary work. And then also I did a really good play up in Northampton. Again, no one really watching it, but a wonderful production called The Glass Cage by J.B. Priestley. Yeah, so theatre was my first.
And that wasn't typecasting. That was
it wasn't at all. No, those are really the only roles that I could find that weren't that. And, you were getting paid probably an illegal amount. I think it was like 200 quid a week or whatever it was. Yeah. It was below equity minimum, but you were starving, quite literally. And I think in some ways that's probably some of the best work I've done as an actor because you're not thinking about all the things you shouldn't be thinking about, which is career move and money, or, if I do this, is it going to affect my relationship with my partner and my son? And, as an artist, a pure artist, if you like, you shouldn't really be thinking about those things. But, when you're not, you're kind of free to just be wild, in the moment. So yeah. I think I peaked then, and it's been just, a steady decline since then. But
well, it doesn't look like it, would have to say. Yeah. When you left school, because you initially went to the LSE and you were there for a year, and you were studying philosophy, logic, and scientific method, which is kind of wow. But you were lured away by a lead role in a production with the National Youth Theatre at that point, which was, I guess, at the time when you didn't realise that all this stuff was going on in in the industry. And which play was that, and which role, and how did that even happen?
It was a couple things. One of them was a small role in a play called Antigone at Hell's Mouth, which a company called Knee-High were doing, and we were doing it at Soho Theatre. So that was one thing with the National Youth Theatre. And then it was also, off the back of that, there was a play at the Tristan Bates Theatre called, oh God, Totally Practically Naked in My Room on a Wednesday Night.
Wow. That is a mouthful.
Yeah. This is all quite back. I haven't even thought about this stuff for years. And it was written and directed by Ricky Beadle Blair, who's this sort of legend of the kind of fringe theatre world. And it was a professional production at the Tristan Bates Theatre. They had already cast it with professional actors, and one of the lead roles had dropped out or something had happened. And bless him, Paul Roseby, who is the head of the National Youth Theatre, they approached him and said, look, we need to have last minute auditions. We're looking for young actors. Do you know anyone from the NYT that would be right for this role? And bless him, Paul recommended me. So I went up for this last minute audition against, quote unquote, real professional actors. And I got that role. That was it, really. That was the first sort of real professional credit. And it was this tiny production in a tiny theatre. But again, it was just very pure. It was like, just had nothing to lose and really, really went for it and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And, you're kind of getting paid beans on toast, but you don't care at that point.
No.
And that was the first thing. And then there was one thing that came off the back of that, which was a film that never got made that I also got cast in open castings and just pure luck, really. And that was when my agent heard about me, and I've been with the same agent since. Yeah.
As a mother of children who are about the age you would have been then, my recommendation, which is boring, sensible, probably whatever age you are, that is a different word, would say finish your degree and then see. And how were your parents about that? Did they think that was a risky move to leave university after a year, or were they fully behind you?
No, they were terrified. I think they thought I'd kind of gone mad. And I kind of had in a way. Yeah, they were terrified. I think it didn't really matter what they thought at that point. I think I was in such a funk. And looking back, really, what was happening was I was going through a really, really severe depression. That's what was happening. There's nothing against LSE or organizations like that, but I don't think they're not kind of naturally designed for artists.
Yeah.
It's really, if you want to be in finance or if you want to be sort of ruling the world, that's what you do. You go there. They did actually have gosh, it's all coming back. They had a theatre department. I did 2 plays with them. They have a theatre there, and that usually is only ever filled up when they have outside productions coming in, have nothing to do with, LSE. I did 2 plays, and one of the plays, there was one person in the audience.
Oh.
Yeah, one person. And it was like, 300 seats or something. And I remember like doing this production. It wasn't great, but I remember thinking like, okay, so I've got through that. And I remember enjoying it and thinking, wow, okay, if I can enjoy that, there's something here. I really am onto something. This really is a passion. That was a real kind of light bulb moment for me. Yeah, that was interesting. But yeah, it was really, I think looking back, my mental health was really suffering. And actually, it was a couple of things that got me out of it. One was watching late night movies. I'm a mild insomniac now, but then I was quite a severe insomniac. And there was this thing on Channel 4. I remember this, but there was this thing called Film 4 on 4. And
yes, I remember.
Remember, right? It's sponsored by That's why. It was basically late night movies, and it was movies that you'd never really see on regular television usually. So they would show a lot of Kubrick movies. They would show like very strange movies like Caligula, and movies that would have perceived kind of adult content, but proper films. And that was my first introduction to cinema. It was a strange time, but I think looking back, that's probably where my mind started thinking about filmmaking as well, because, I was watching some great films for free on VHS. Really, like some of the best films kind of ever made. I realized like when you're kind of in a psychological kind of doldrum and you're 19, 20 years old, I think film can really take a hold of you in a way that is so pure. It really is taking you to another world. It's true escapism, because you don't know who you are.
No, it's
Not that I know
true.
who I am now, but it's like you. So I think that's really interesting. But then that world, film and TV, was so far away. I kind of didn't really think about it for a while when I did theatre. And it wasn't really until I did a film called My Brother the Devil, which was 2012.
12.
That was kind of where I really became a sort of film person, if you like, or a screen actor, a proper screen actor. You're the lead role in a film that's actually good, and you're the sort, wins awards and things.
Having made that decision, I'm not happy at the LSE. And then to have that shock that then suddenly everyone wanted to typecast you, not getting the roles that you thought you would be able to. I mean, I have two daughters who are singer-songwriters, and both have experienced that playing to nobody. It's a road riddled with rejection. And was there ever any time that you thought, actually, it's just not going to work?
Pretty much every day. I mean, I think, and I kind of still have that, if I'm totally honest. I think a lot of us are like that. I genuinely think that my career's over every other week, genuinely. And
Really?
yeah, I'm not just saying that out of false humility. I think it's a trick that the mind plays on us, but it also comes from an emotional truth and a real vulnerability of, I don't know where my next job's going to come from. And I don't know, just even financially, I don't know when I'm going to be able to put food on the plate and pay the rent. Obviously now it's different in the sense that I have a career and I can work and I can make a living and blah, 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 blah. My dreams and goals are still, in my mind, constantly being crushed every other day. So it's the same psychological journey, but in a different context. So yeah, that happens all the time. And someone, I forget who it was, some very successful person said to me, someone like Stephen Fry or someone I got to meet years ago who was very, very smart and successful. And they said that, as soon as you lose that feeling of I'm a failure, you have nothing to offer as an artist because you're no longer humble and vulnerable. And I kind of understand what that person was saying because I think that's really what makes us human, isn't it? Is that fear. It reminds me of a quote from Asterix. I used to love that. Asterix and Obelix there's a quote from, I think he's the head of the Gaul tribe or Gallic tribe, and his name was Vital Statistics. So
That was his name.
That was his name. And he had this, I think it was him, or maybe it was the Druid, I forget, but it was one of them. And they had this great quote, which I always wrote down, which was, fear is a remarkable stimulus.
Yeah, it's true.
I think that's so true. There's something about fear that I think in the creative kind of endeavors that can be weirdly useful. And that sort of life, if you're super confident, if you're genuinely super confident and you really love all your work and what you're doing, I mean, great, I suppose, but are you growing? I don't know.
Having mentioned My Brother the Devil, which was, as you say, your first major role, I watched it. So good. It's a gritty tale of life of two brothers on an East End London estate, in and amongst drug dealing and gangs, and you're the lead. You are the brother, the devil. And I'm trustee of a charity called Key for Life, which we go into prisons and we help young offenders try and find work. Anyway, so I listened to your voice and your accent, and that everything you were saying was just absolutely spot on. So the director is Sally El Hosseini, and I think she said she lived for a couple of years sort of in amongst that gang culture, didn't she?
Yeah.
And she was initially planning on street casting it, but that didn't happen. Why didn't she street cast it?
Well, the story that I've been told is that the movie touches on sexuality. They struggled to find an actor who was, quote, street cast, as you said, that would play that part of the role. So I think that was kind of one of those serendipitous moments where I think my real life, what I was going through kind of intersected with the role that I ended up playing. And she really wanted something very authentic. So getting a kind of professional actor, if I could call myself that at the time, was not on high on her list. But just the way that I like to work generally as an actor, and even as a filmmaker too, I don't like to have rules. But generally, I think just immersion is a big thing, and osmosis. myself and Sally work that way. And Sally now, that's why I met Sally, and she's my partner in real life, and we have a kid together. And, I
Oh,
think
I didn't realize that. I've been
yeah,
seeing you in, in photographs and stuff
yeah,
and
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
that you worked together. I didn't realize she was your partner as well. Oh,
So we met on
oh my
the film.
gosh, that's so
Yeah,
lovely.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we met on that film, and we kind of ended up together after it. But I think because the movie did quite well and we were traveling the world, with film festivals, I think,
It did brilliantly.
yeah, we sort of fell for each other. But it was just one of those films that was kind of life-changing, really. It was a small film, but it really kind of punched above its weight. But the experience of obviously meeting Sally and playing that role was massive. It was more than just the film itself, and it's a film that really, I think, stands up really well. And still to this day, I mean, I think 2 weeks ago I was in West London in Notting Hill, and I got recognised there by a bunch of people. And it's a movie that just kind of grows and grows and touches on a lot of things that are very dear to my heart: sexuality and class and race and culture and family, second generation migrants, and all these kind of things that really define my life. It was weird because I'm not that guy. I'm not a gangster. I'm not from the streets, and I didn't live that life at all. I spent, I think, about 6 months while the movie was trying to get made. I spent with the real guys that it was inspired by, and Sally.
And were you following them?
Yeah, I was just
And they were happy to have you there.
yeah. I mean, they didn't. Most of them, aside from one, who was actually in the film in the end, but they didn't know that the film was touching on sexuality. So they knew it was about, these two young British Arab brothers who were Muslims with a small
Yeah.
M. And, they were on a council estate, and my character was a drug dealer and all this stuff. They knew that, but they didn't know that it was kind of a coming of age mixed with a coming out story. If they'd known that, I don't think they would have welcomed me, because there was just, there were many moments when I was with them where, their homophobia was so clear. I remember one time I was at this guy's flat, and tiny place. He must have had about 5 or 6 of his mates staying there. And they had one couch. That's all it had. And they had this TV, and they were watching Family Guy.
Yeah.
There was an episode uh, where I forget the character's name, but he was kind of twiddling his nipples. It's kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, they've been laughing their heads off. I thought it was the funniest thing they've ever seen in their life. And as soon as that happened, they started effing and blinding and saying, all these kind of, harsh words. And they turned it off and got really kind of affronted by it, and then kind of moved on to the next thing. But that moment, I was just like, holy shit, I'm just so glad that they do not know. And what was crazy was, it was crazy. When the movie came out, I just kind of disappeared.
Ran.
Yeah. I just sort of slowly disappeared. I don't think all of them saw the movie, actually. Some of them did, but not all of them. These are real. I guess I can talk about it now because it's a long time ago. But these are real gang members, and some of these guys were on tag, and these are interesting guys. They're not kind of living outside the system. Yeah.
Did Sally cast any of those guys as in street cast?
There were only a couple of professional actors in it. It was mainly street cast. Even the guy who played my younger brother, who was the other lead, Fadi, he had never acted before, but he was British Egyptian. He was from a council estate. He's living that life. And it was quite brave of Sally, actually, to cast me, because I could have ruined her movie, is the truth.
On the contrary, you won the most promising newcomer at the British Independent Film Awards. You were selected as a BAFTA Breakthrough Brit, and you won Best Actor at the Milan International Film Festival. So it paid off.
Yeah.
I read an interview that you did that everyone had told you that you were going to win. And so you thought you wouldn't win. And
Yes.
so when it came to the fact that you did win, you hadn't prepared a speech or anything. So how did you manage that off the cuff speech?
Terrible. Absolutely awful. So I did such a stupid thing where I didn't prepare. And also I did this, oh God, we're at the Biffers and all these fancy people are there. There's Jude Law, there's all these kind of, it was Terry Gilliam, there was Tom Hiddleston, all these fancy people.
Yes.
Everyone was there.
I taught Tom Hiddleston.
Did you? Oh, Tom,
yeah, I did.
Guy, I know him a bit. Yeah, he's a nice guy. It was just weird, yeah. So everyone was kind of getting very emotional, and I kind of leaned over the side. I said, "Why is everyone getting so emotional? It's just a blinking award, who cares?" And of course, my name gets called out. Deer in the headlights. I go up. So that week, couple of things happened. My auntie, who was passed away recently, but I was very close with her. She was paranoid schizophrenic, and she was just sort of going through a tough time, and it kind of affected me a bit. And then also, I was actually putting on weight for an audition, so you look at
You weren't
it.
at your best.
I wasn't at my best. I was quite heavy, and when you put on weight, I've done it before. Emotionally, really, you get very sensitive. You become a sort of baby. So when I went up, I started my kind of terrible speech that hadn't been prepped, and I started bursting into tears.
Oh, did
Bursting
you?
into tears. And it was really hilarious because like everyone thought, oh, he's just really so emotional about this award, but it wasn't really that. It was but I think for some reason people liked it. They thought it was kind of genuine, but I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my gosh, what is that? Oh, but so I cried. Anyway, I won't do it again.
Well, you've been in lots of things since, and we're not going to be able to talk about all of them, although I'd love to actually. And I'm going to just run through them because they're in no particular order, and the list is not comprehensive. But in 2021, you were, as we mentioned it, in No Man's Land, and you play this London-born British Egyptian who joins ISIS.
Yeah.
2022, you are in the film The Swimmers, which was nominated for Outstanding British Film at BAFTA. It occupied the #1 spot on Netflix in 47 countries, and Sally co-wrote it and directed it. It's a drama based, for those who don't know, it's a drama based on the real journey of two young sisters from war-torn Syria and their journey to the 2016 Rio Olympics. And the film earned a 4-minute standing ovation at the Toronto Film Festival, which is just so cool. It's an amazing, amazing film. And in particular, those boat scenes are very hard to forget. And you play Imad, a fellow refugee who befriends the sisters in the joint quest to get to Lesbos. So how did you prepare for that role?
Wow. So I found a friend of a friend of a friend who was almost identical to what the character was, which was a young Afghan refugee who was very educated and came from Kabul all the way to Germany for a better life and ended up on that famous perilous boat journey across the Aegean, left his family. I found someone who was just identical. He's a lovely man. He's called Mansour. I still am in contact with him.
Where is he now? Is he in the UK?
He's in the UK. Yeah, he's in the UK now. And he's married and then got a kid, and it's wonderful. But yeah, so it was really kind of spending a lot of time with him, talking about his life. And I really it was the only time where I almost literally based the character on one person. Like that was kind of it. The experience that I brought from myself was really from my mum. I am the son of a migrant who crossed a world to get to London, again, as a young person. And again, she was educated too. And I think, what that film, I hope did, it did many things. What I hope it did more than anything is that it showed that most refugees are actually, they're very young. They tend to be mainly in their sort of 20s, maybe early 30s. A lot of them are highly educated people. And, they are forced into a situation that, for the most part, they have no choice in. Obviously, I don't want to kind of sound like I'm on some sort of soapbox because, I'm just an actor and a filmmaker. But, you look at what's happened with all the rhetoric in the last, I'd say, probably 3 to 4 years. And I think it's become surreal in how extreme it's become. So that movie really means a lot for so many reasons. But if I'm totally honest, I think that's probably the one film that I was thinking about my mum the most.
Okay.
I think, even though the journey she went on was very different and it wasn't anywhere near as dangerous as what the refugees go in The Swimmers, I was thinking about her a lot in my heart. And when she watched it, she found it very emotional.
I'm sure.
Yeah. It's a special film, and I'm very proud of what Sally did as a filmmaker. I'm just proud to be involved in it. I think what was quite extraordinary as well was that film ended up being a huge hit, as you mentioned. I think there are all these kind of numbers flying around, but I think someone once said it's been seen by around 120 million people in the world on Netflix. So that does show the power of cinema.
Yes.
you know, because I can often get down, I think, on cinema and on TV, because I think it is, for the most part, I think it, unfortunately, you know, it is entertainment and a business. And then within that kind of circle, it can be an art form. But ultimately, you know, there's demand and supply curves, and it's very much about money. But when a film like that does what it does and is seen by millions of people, especially young people all over the world, you realize that there's a power, a potential power to what we're doing. I mean, I remember, like, what was crazy about that film is that I remember I was filming No Man's Land Series 2 in Morocco, and the swimmers had just come out that week on Netflix. And I hadn't seen any of the numbers. I didn't know what it was doing. And I was shooting on a Friday. I think it had just come out a few days before. And on the Saturday, I went out for dinner in Casablanca with a couple of mates who were in the cast. And there was a group of 6 local Moroccan young women who just kind of came up to me and were just gushing about the movie. I was like, oh my God, it's only been out for like a few days.
Yeah.
That was when I knew something had done. And still to this day, I kind of get recognized for it. Yeah. A special film. I think it's one of a kind that I really, and also, you know, that was a Hollywood film, financed by Hollywood. That was all American money. So again, that's a place that I can be a little bit at odds with at times, how they function in Hollywood, even though I kind of work within Hollywood at times.
Yeah.
What was great was that, you know, the fact they financed the swimmers, I think shows that cinema is going to go in that direction. I hope anyway, and TV. I think it will start telling stories that have a bit more meaning, but not tell them in this sort of pretentious way where we're kind of almost feeling sorry for our subject matters.
Yes.
What I thought was good that Sally did is that they just showed them as human beings who laugh and cry. And do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we can get, especially I think in independent cinema, we can start making these subjects almost one note in their seriousness, even though they are very serious. The truth is that that's not life.
No.
Life has all of its colors, you know, and I think they showed that really well in that film.
I agree with you that film is so powerful, and that I think it's really hard when you hear the endless debate that's going on at the moment about how many immigrants do you allow in. No one can possibly really understand it. It's just too big, and it's too far away from what it really is, which is it's about people and about human beings trying to either escape something awful or find something better, which is what we're all trying to look for: purpose and happiness and love. And it's quite simple, really. But I think when you look at the numbers, you can't have any empathy because it's just too overwhelming. Whereas a film can actually focus on a family or focus on a person and tell a story. And then, just like you've done with Unicorns, you can understand it a lot better, which is, if you do it properly, which in The Swimmers it's done properly, it can make a difference.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, just going to touch on a couple of others, and then I want to move on to Unicorns because I'm really excited to hear about that. So 2017 to 2022, you're in the ITV series The Good Karma Hospital. It's 4 seasons set in Sri Lanka. You're one of the leads. You're the hot doctor. It's really fun. I'm sure you see, for anyone who's not seeing your face you're making now, that's making you cringe. You're also in the lead in the film Love in a Bottle. It's an online love story and it's COVID inspired. So the roles seem to be coming thick and fast now. And I know you've done loads more besides, and we touched a little bit on the theatre, but we haven't really gone into that in any great detail. But given the time constraints, let's move on to your latest venture, which is the film Unicorns. It's being released on the 5th of July, 2024. And I was lucky enough to watch it ahead of this conversation. And I just loved it. And that sounds really trite because, it's such an easy thing to say, but I really loved it. You wrote it. You co-directed it with Sally. It's produced by Trudy Styler. I mean, there's lots of other people it was produced by, but because I'm such a fan of Stings, I thought, just have to mention Trudy Styler. It's a story of Luke, a single father from Essex who works as a mechanic, and he meets Aisha, a British Indian drag queen living a double life. And their chance encounter leads them both on an emotional journey of self-discovery and identity. And In an interview you did with Deadline, you said, "This is a very personal story for me with the theme of dual culture clash, sexuality, fatherhood, and forbidden romance originating from my own experiences." So could you tell us about that?
You sound like my therapist.
I'm sorry.
Right? That's okay. We can have public therapy. And I've spoken about this before, but I don't know who I am, like identity wise. As we've touched upon, I'm half Indian, half English. I have family who are working class, who are middle class. I've had sexually fluid experiences my whole life. I just don't understand why, as human beings, there is this trend now of being our hashtags and sort of saying, I am this identity label. Now, look, I have friends who swear by those and it gives them a comfort. And I think that's great. But just for me, my own experience, it's never been that because, and this is really what the film, I guess, is about, is that you can think you're one thing on a Friday, something can happen on a weekend, and on a Monday, you have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
And really, what we are as people, I believe, is we are our actions. We are not our labels, we are not our hashtags. That's something that I have kind of dealt with and thought about and experienced my entire life, in particular being an actor as well. Constantly put in these boxes of being someone who's brown or being someone who's this, whatever. Mainstream society has just become more and more reductive in how it pigeonholes us. And of course, social media has made everything even worse. So that was something that was in my mind and heart for a long time. And I wanted to make my first film and I wanted to make it about that. And at the same time, I met this extraordinary person called Asifa Lahore, who's now a very close friend of mine. And Asifa, when I met her, was the UK's only out South Asian Muslim drag queen. We were just we just hit it off. We were talking about all the same stuff that I was just mentioning. I said, look, I would love to make a film that's set in your world, set in the Gaysian world, the South Asian queer world, which I'd always known about and I kind of dabbled in, but I hadn't really got to what it was really about, the beating heart. And Asifa immediately said, yes. I said, really? Yep. Luckily, she had seen My Brother the Devil years before and loved it. So that was where it all started. And I just spent like 2.5 years in all of my free time when if I was making a movie or a series in the UK, I would travel to all these Gaysian nights. I would get to know everyone. And the story came to me really because the real life Lukes, the real life Aishas and Ashiks, they're all there. And everything that happens in that film has either happened to me or Asifa or the other South Asian queens that I know. Yeah, and to put it in the context of a romance was very natural because I've fallen in love with people that sort of took me by surprise. And also, really, all of these South Asian queens and all of the Gaysians in general, they're all just desperate for love. They all want their kind of Bollywood romance, really. They want their hunky king to come and save them from an unfair world. Yeah, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it, really. I loved writing it. I loved directing it. I loved working with Sally again.
Is this the first time you wrote anything? Because
First time I wrote something and directed something that got made.
okay.
Yeah. So obviously there'll be hopefully lots more to come. But what I've learned over the years from people who are a lot more experienced and wise than me is that your first thing that sort of breaks you, whether it be as an actor or filmmaker, it kind of defines the rhythm of your career for quite a long time. I was very lucky that it happened with My Brother the Devil with acting. But with filmmaking, I wanted it to be similar in the sense that something I really was proud of and that was very me. So this is probably the most sort of exposed I've been, I think, as a creative person. Yeah.
I watched a talk that Asifa gave on YouTube because I read that she was a consultant on the film and she's co-producer. And in this talk, she said, I'm British, Pakistani, gay, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm what the F I am. I love being me. And I thought, wow, what an inspiration. I mean, that is just, that is what we should all aspire to be, just to be, I love being me. That's the goal. Very few of us ever get remotely close.
No, it's hard. And you know what? Like, she's not just saying that, she's living that. She's gone through fire to get to that point. And she still has her wobbles like all of us do. but she's gone through fire. I mean, you can't imagine what a lot of these Gaysians go through. You really can't. The movie obviously is quite gritty at times. It's also very romantic and funny and colorful, but it's a slice of reality at times. But to be honest, there are certain things that happen to the real life Aishas and Ashiks and the real life Gaysian drag queens in particular. You can't even imagine. It was almost, there was so much darkness that if I put too much of it in the film, people wouldn't believe it,
Yeah.
you know. But there's obviously, there's plenty of that anyway. But I'm so proud of it and it's doing really well and people do seem to like it. But look, I'm almost sick of the movie. I've seen it so many times. I have such a weird relationship with the film. And I talk to my filmmaker friends and I talk to Sally, all these people who are more experienced than me, and I kind of say, God, is this normal to feel this way where you're kind of sick of it? And they're like, yeah, for your first film in particular, because you always go overboard on your first film. I'm so proud of it. Yeah.
And what's the process?
So in short, I research it for a long time. I'm big on research. And once the story has sort of come to me roughly, I plan it out and then I just write it. And then you go through multiple drafts and you develop it. I developed it mainly with my producer, Philip Hurd, who's a fantastic producer who was on board since the beginning, 8, 9 years ago. And I take a lot of notes. It goes through many drafts. You take notes from potential financiers, da, 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 da. Eventually, at some point, hopefully, you get money to make the damn thing. And we did that. And people love the script. Once that happens, hopefully you've got either some or all the finance to make the movie. That's when you start casting. We found, these two incredible actors for the lead roles. And one is Ben Hardy, who plays Luke, who, as you said, is this white, straight, single dad from Essex, who's a mechanic, who is kind of holding up his family and comes from a very alpha male, tough environment. And he ends up falling in love with, to his surprise, with the beautiful, extremely charismatic Aisha, who is a South Asian realism drag queen. Now, realism drag is something that we've had in South Asian culture for centuries. It's almost the complete opposite of the American style drag that we all now know of because of, RuPaul, which I love. I love all that stuff. But that's very kind of in your face. And it's almost like deliberately over the top, you're kind of wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Whereas realism drag is the opposite. It's all very internalized. It's all about passing in a very subtle, naturalistic way. And when you meet your first realism drag queen, it's quite an extraordinary experience, actually. They are just really living, breathing proof of gender fluidity. And, as you said, with, what Asifa said, they kind of are what they want to be. They're not female, they're not male, they don't care. They just are them.
Yeah.
That's something I believe in, not just in terms of gender and sexuality, but many things, all identities. But yeah, it's we found our drag queen, which is very hard to find, in Jason Patel, who is a very kind of new, fresh actor who this is really his first kind of proper role on film. And Jason is really, he's very similar to the character. Jason was living that life. He's an extraordinary performer, great dancer and singer, and he does all those things in the film. Beautiful person.
Yeah, when he's in the film, he's beautiful, but he manages to pull off that sort of vulnerability. He's funny, he's kind, he's troubled, he's sexy, all at once.
Yeah.
All the time.
Incredible. And that's all from his real life. You can't fake these things, right? Like, ultimately, I've said this many times before, but I really believe that a camera is a lie detector. You don't really know if someone is being truthful until you put a camera on them.
That's so interesting.
We didn't know anything about Prince Andrew until that interview. What a camera does, obviously it quite literally puts a focus on someone and blacks out everything else. But actually what it does is you're receiving tiny little kind of clues, little inflections of voice, little bits of sweat. Well, not sweat in the term sense of, but it's like, as human beings, we have this ability in us to analyze that and take in that information. It's something that's natural to all of us. And I think what a camera does is it just heightens that sense. I believe that when you're acting, or when you're, in the case of me making a film as a director, when you're casting, you're not looking for an actor per se. You're looking for someone who can play that role in an emotionally true way. You're looking for behavior, really. Acting really is the wrong thing to call it. It's not acting, because bad acting, people act and they kind of act angry, but no one does that in real life. It's real. Often you're casting people who can behave like the character, not act like the character. So that's
Right.
good. We found two actors that could just totally, embody those roles. And really the key to the film is the chemistry, the natural chemistry that Ben and Jason have. And that's something that you again, you just can't fake. And they had it naturally, instantaneously when they met. So we did this sort of clever thing where once we realized we wanted them to be our lead roles, we said, and they'd already met in the chemistry test, in the audition. Myself and Sally said, look, you guys, you need to just not see each other at all. Don't exchange numbers. Stay away from each other until we shoot, because we want you to get to know each other on screen.
Yeah. Oh, that's really clever.
Keep that fiery chemistry on screen. We want to capture that vulnerability, that danger, that natural attraction on camera. And they were up for it. So they didn't see each other at all, really. They saw each other at the read-through briefly, but we kept them apart. And actually the first scene that Jason shot and that they shot together was the love scene. And
that was the first shot they did.
Yeah. The first scene they did together and the first scene that Jason shot in the movie. Because we knew that, again, it's a scene you don't really want them to fake it, and it's a very vulnerable scene. That scene really defines the film. It's a very vulnerable movie, scene that they're kind of finding each other. And there's a lot of danger and risk in it. And to act that when you've got a camera this close in your face for those
so hard
on the eyes, yeah. But honestly, a wonderful experience. And, I think probably my most rewarding experience of my career as an actor or as a filmmaker. And I hope to do more as a filmmaker, not acting in it, and as a filmmaker, probably acting in it too. I think now it's really kind of opened doors, creatively for me.
First of all, Ben Hardy he must have been a great person to get on board, because I've kind of watched him in other things. He's Roger Taylor in Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah. He's the lead in Love at First Sight. He is doing all sorts of different things. But the two of them together were I was just enchanted by them as a couple, and not wanting to kind of give anything away. When I started watching it, I thought, you're not going to be able to pull this off. It's just going to be too difficult. It's just, it's going to be too difficult for the outcome that I wanted. It's going to be really hard. And then the credits go up and I sort of sat back and I was speechless. I thought, you did it. You absolutely did it. That last scene, and I was tearful, just like the swimmers, I think, can change the way people think. There's been a lot of mudslinging between the LGBTQ community at them, also from them.
Yes.
And when you see something like that, which is just so pure, I think it's enormously powerful.
Oh, thank you.
So what happens now? You've got 2 weeks to the premiere, and then what happens?
It's technically in cinemas now. It's got it's on in previews now. It's in all View cinemas right now. So View, which is obviously the biggest cinema chain in this country, they kindly love the movie, and they have a Pride season for June, and they have 4 films they play, and we're the lead film in Pride season. So it's technically in cinemas right now, but the main release is July the 5th, where it has more regular screenings and will be in other cinemas too. Yeah, and then hopefully millions of people see it and it does its thing, but films have quite a long life. This is a big splash. The UK cinema release is a big thing and a big deal. And then there are other places it will be on too as well, internationally and everything. But as a filmmaker, all I hope for really is that it's just seen by as many people as possible, because I believe in this film massively. I really stand by it. I truly believe it's a film that needs to be seen. It's not pure entertainment in the sense, it's not just for the sake of that. I think it's very entertaining. I think a lot of people do feel it is too.
Yes.
But ultimately it has something to say, and hopefully not in a kind of obvious smash you over the head way, but it makes you feel and makes you think. And that's really all you can ask for, I think, in a film.
Yeah. Well, it's already been celebrated by festivals around the world, and there were a handful of reviews. One said, a gorgeous, glittering hidden gem. Another said, the kind of movie we've been waiting for. Another said, transcendent leading performances. So it's getting attention already. So let's hope it keeps going. James, I'm going to finish with just some general questions. You've kind of answered this already, but I'm just going to say it anyway, just in case you have something else you want to add. But you've played a drug dealer, a refugee. You've written a love story about a drag queen. To the outside eye, you are focusing on those who are marginalized in society. I guess if that's not an accident, why?
I think weirdly, I probably feel like I am marginalized. I know it's a strange thing to say. Really, when I look back on my journey with mental health in particular, that's something that has really touched me and my family in quite a strong way. It's something that I still deal with every day. And I think, when you have what I call mental health discordance, and I think we all have it to a certain degree, but I think some people have it more than others. I think that's something that I know that I will always have my whole life.
And when you say mental health discordance, what do you...
I mean, without kind of going too in depth with what I have, as a diagnosis, because I'll kind of talk about that maybe another time when I'm more ready. But what it is that ever since I was a kid, I've always struggled with, I think, dealing with the world. I've always been hypersensitive. I used to cry at a click at anything. And I think that's probably why I became creative and ended up going into the arts. It's like when you end up taking medication, getting diagnosed and all these kind of things, and things become very real. And when I found out about the history of my family and all these things, I realized that the most important thing in the world is mental health, not just to me, but to everyone. And I think what being creative has done, it's given me an outlet to kind of shout into the wind safely,
Yeah.
And it's given me an outlet to just laugh as well at myself and at the world and all these things. That really is, it kind of puts me, I suppose, in a slightly unusual, maybe marginalized sense. The more people I know that kind of have a similar mind to me, I think the more I realize that being normal is not normal.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Exactly. And I think to a certain degree, we all are going through the same journey that I'm going through my mental health. But yeah, like I know what a really deep down is, and I know what a really high is. And somewhere in the middle is just a better place to be. But I think now I'm very lucky that I can make films, I can make television, I can do some theatre, I can act, I can write, I can direct, and I can explore this idea of what the hell is going on in life. Why are we here? What is going on? Does it matter? And to be honest, my conclusion currently has been this, is that the only thing that really helps is just having a laugh. There's nothing else that can really help. And actually with unicorns, to be honest, even though it's a quote romantic drama, really what makes unicorns a proper film and what makes it really truthful, and this is what I learned from almost every Gaysian that I now know, is that the more tragic your life is, the more you just need to laugh.
Yeah.
And some of the funniest people I've ever met are in this film. And I think that is what I think I will probably take to my grave, So I don't know if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. And I think some people disguise it and some people pretend that everything is wonderful. And that, if people say they're having, a marvelous time at all times and they're super successful, then they're lying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if you find out what it is, will you please tell me? Because I'd love to know.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
What advice would you give to aspiring creatives who are beginning their journey?
I read this somewhere, or someone told me something. They said know when to not take advice.
Okay.
And I think that's very key. Doesn't mean be arrogant and don't take things in, but know when not to take advice. Because ultimately, I think, this is an industry full of rejection. You get 99 no's and one yes, right? And ultimately, I think to swim through that, you've got to know when not to listen. Because ultimately, people will tell you that you can't do what you want to do because they can't.
Right.
I think don't take everyone's advice. Just take some.
Okay.
Including your own, because sometimes we give ourselves bad advice and we lie to ourselves.
That's great advice. Most important daily habit?
Oh, meditating. I do my version of it. It's a pretty rubbish version. It's like, meditation for dummies. But, it's meditation.
It is. It's still meditation.
Yeah. And it doesn't always work. And sometimes I'm crap at it and I get really angry and frustrated and hop on YouTube instead. But, I trying to meditate. Yeah.
Okay. Funniest audition, or maybe perhaps that's the worst audition.
God, I did. I did an audition once. It was a tape. It was a Zoom, and I did the classic thing where I was wearing shorts when I should have been wearing trousers, but I was wearing a suit on top. And then, of course, when I got up and they saw my shorts and they all laughed. Embarrassing, but I think they remembered me. I didn't get the role, but they remembered me. That was quite embarrassing. Yeah.
Okay, and last one. Where would you like to be in 5 years?
Just sort of spiritually strong, I think. I don't want to use the word happy. I don't know what that means, but just spiritually strong. Well, spiritually sound is a better word. Strength is nothing. Strength is just vulnerability, isn't it, really? But I think spiritually sound, just whatever that means. I don't care where I am geographically. It's not about that. It's about where I am internally, spiritually sound. Yeah.
Well, thank you so, so much for today. And good luck with Unicorns. I'm going to be eagerly following the reviews because it deserves to do so well. And I was thinking that, the title of our conversation should be sort of, James, Krishna Floyd, the story so far, because I suspect we're going to be hearing a lot more from you. I hope so. Anyway, in all sorts of different forms. But for now, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was really lovely. Yeah.
You've been listening to Bandwidth Conversations. Thanks to Anna B, Head of Marketing, to all at the podcast consultant, to Bagawai for the music, to the Money Maze podcast. Thank you for listening. Any feedback, please email me, katie@bandwidthconversations.com. Please sign up on our website, www.bandwidthconversations.com, so we can notify you about new podcast releases. We hope to see you again soon.